You're sitting in a completely safe situation, maybe a work meeting, a social gathering, or even alone at home, when suddenly your heart starts racing. Your palms sweat, your breathing becomes shallow. Your mind floods with catastrophic thoughts about everything that could go wrong. You tell yourself this is anxiety. You tell yourself you're worried about the future. But what if Sigmund Freud was right? What if you're not anxious about what's coming? You're remembering something that already happened. What if every panic attack is actually a flashback, and every moment of inexplicable dread is your unconscious mind trying to tell you something your conscious mind has forgotten? Let's explore Freud's most unsettling discovery, that anxiety isn't about the future at all. It's about the past, disguised and buried so deep that you don't even know you're remembering. Freud spent decades studying the human mind, and one of his most profound insights was that anxiety and memory are intimately connected in ways that most people never realize. He wrote, "The unconscious is the true psychical reality. In its innermost nature, it is as much unknown to us as the reality of the external world. Your unconscious mind holds every experience you've ever had, including the ones that were too overwhelming, too painful, or too confusing for your conscious mind to process at the time. When you were young and something threatening or traumatic happened, your developing brain had two choices: process the experience fully or bury it to protect your ability to function. More often than not, especially with repeated trauma or overwhelming experiences, your mind chose burial. But here's what Freud discovered. Buried doesn't mean gone. Repressed doesn't mean resolved. Those memories are still there, still active, still influencing your nervous system's responses to the present moment. Freud observed that what we call anxiety is often the feeling of those buried memories trying to surface, but encountering the psychological defenses that keep them buried. He wrote, "Anxiety is the reaction to the perception of the absence of the object." But what object? Often it's not an object at all. It's the absence of safety, protection, or understanding that you needed as a child, but didn't receive. Your adult anxiety might be your child self's remembered terror, surfacing in situations that unconsciously remind your nervous system of those early experiences. Think about your most intense anxiety episodes. Do they really match the actual threat level of your current situation? Or are they disproportionate responses that seem to come from somewhere deeper? Freud would say they're coming from your personal history, from moments when you were genuinely helpless, genuinely in danger, or genuinely overwhelmed. Your nervous system learned to respond with hypervigilance, panic, or dread. And now, decades later, similar situations trigger the same responses, even when the actual danger is long past. This is why Freud distinguished between fear and anxiety. Fear is a response to a present threat. Anxiety is a response to a remembered threat that your conscious mind can't access. When you see a snake, you feel fear. That's appropriate to the current situation. When you feel overwhelming dread before a job interview, you're probably feeling anxiety, which means you're remembering something that made you feel similarly threatened in the past. Freud wrote, "The interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind." But he could have said the same thing about anxiety. The interpretation of anxiety is another royal road to understanding what your unconscious mind is trying to tell you. Every anxiety symptom is a message. Every panic attack is communication from the parts of yourself that don't have words. Your racing heart might be remembering a time when you needed to run but couldn't. Your shallow breathing might be remembering a time when you felt suffocated or trapped. Your catastrophic thinking might be remembering a time when something catastrophic actually did happen, and your young mind learned that safety is an illusion. Let's examine how this works in practice. Freud identified several ways that repressed memories disguise themselves as present moment anxiety. Displacement. Your unconscious mind attaches the feelings from a past trauma to a current situation that resembles it in some way. You might feel intense anxiety about public speaking, not because speaking is dangerous, but because it reminds your unconscious of childhood moments when being seen or heard resulted in criticism, shame, or danger. Condensation. Multiple traumatic memories combine into a single anxiety trigger. Your fear of abandonment might contain memories of physical abandonment, emotional neglect, and broken promises, all compressed into one overwhelming feeling that surfaces whenever someone is late, distracted, or emotionally unavailable. Symbolization. Your unconscious mind converts literal memories into symbolic fears. A fear of heights might actually be a memory of feeling emotionally dropped or unsupported. A fear of enclosed spaces might be a memory of feeling trapped in a dysfunctional family system with no escape. Projection. You experience anxiety about others doing to you what was actually done to you in the past. If you're constantly anxious about people judging you, you might be remembering times when you were actually criticized, shamed, or rejected. But your mind has projected that memory onto future interactions. Freud understood that the unconscious mind doesn't operate by the same rules as conscious thought. It doesn't distinguish between past and present, between literal and symbolic, between self and other. So when something in your current environment resembles something from your past, even in ways you can't consciously detect, your unconscious mind responds as if the past is happening again. This is why your anxiety often feels so urgent and life-threatening, even when you're logically safe. Your unconscious mind is responding to a remembered threat, and to that part of your psyche, the danger is completely real and happening right now. Freud wrote, "The ego is not master in its own house." Your conscious mind, your ego, thinks it's in control of your thoughts and feelings. But your unconscious mind, where these buried memories live, often overrides your conscious intentions. You can tell yourself that you're safe, that there's nothing to worry about, that your anxiety is irrational. But if your unconscious mind is remembering danger, your nervous system will respond accordingly. This is why traditional approaches to anxiety that focus only on changing thoughts or managing symptoms often provide limited relief. They're addressing the surface manifestations without touching the underground source. Freud believed that lasting relief comes from making the unconscious conscious, from bringing those buried memories to light so they can be processed, understood, and integrated. He developed techniques like free association, dream analysis, and transference interpretation, specifically to help people access these hidden memories and understand how they're influencing present moment experiences. But you don't need to be in psychoanalysis to start recognizing when your anxiety might be memory in disguise. Freud observed certain patterns that can help you identify when your nervous system is responding to the past rather than the present. Disproportionate response. When your anxiety level doesn't match the actual threat in your current situation, you're probably remembering something that was genuinely threatening in the past. Physical symptoms. Without clear cause. When your body is having intense physical reactions, racing heart, sweating, nausea, trembling. But you can't identify what in your current environment would cause these responses. Your body might be remembering a time when these responses were appropriate. Familiar feeling of helplessness. When your anxiety comes with a specific feeling of being trapped, powerless, or unable to protect yourself, you're likely remembering childhood experiences of genuine helplessness. Sudden onset. When anxiety hits you suddenly and intensely without obvious triggers, your unconscious mind might have detected something that reminds it of past trauma, a smell, a tone of voice, a facial expression, or even just the emotional atmosphere of a situation. Repetitive patterns. When you find yourself consistently anxious in similar types of situations, authority figures, intimate relationships, conflict, performance situations, you're probably encountering ongoing triggers for specific childhood memories. Freud also noticed that people often develop anxiety around the exact things that would have helped them in their original traumatic situations. If you were punished for expressing anger as a child, you might feel intense anxiety before any confrontation, because your unconscious mind remembers that anger was dangerous, even though anger might be exactly what you need to protect yourself now. If you were shamed for being vulnerable, you might feel overwhelming anxiety before emotional intimacy, because your unconscious mind remembers that openness led to pain, even though vulnerability might be exactly what you need for connection now. This creates a terrible bind. The things that would help you heal or grow trigger the very memories that convinced you these things were dangerous. Freud wrote, "Where it was, there ego shall be." In simpler terms, where unconscious compulsion was, there conscious choice shall be. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety entirely. It's to understand what your anxiety is trying to tell you so you can respond consciously rather than being controlled by unconscious memories. When you feel anxiety rising, instead of immediately trying to make it go away, Freud would encourage you to get curious. What does this feeling remind you of? When have you felt this exact combination of sensations before? What was happening in your life the first time you remember feeling this way? Sometimes the connections are obvious. Sometimes they're subtle or symbolic. Sometimes they don't become clear until you've sat with the feeling long enough for your unconscious mind to provide more information. But Freud believed that your unconscious mind wants to heal. It's been trying to tell you something important, and anxiety is one of the ways it gets your attention. The panic attack during your presentation might be your unconscious mind remembering the terror of being criticized or humiliated as a child. The anxiety before social events might be your unconscious mind remembering times when you were rejected, excluded, or made to feel defective. The overwhelming dread when someone you love is late might be your unconscious mind remembering the terror of abandonment, neglect, or unpredictability in your early life. These memories shaped your nervous system's threat detection patterns. Situations that consciously seem safe can unconsciously feel dangerous because they resemble circumstances that were actually dangerous in your past. Freud understood that healing happens when you can make these connections conscious. When you understand that your anxiety is actually a memory, you can start to distinguish between past and present. You can acknowledge the reality of what happened to you while recognizing that you're not in that situation anymore. You can honor the wisdom of your nervous system's attempts to protect you while updating its information about your current capabilities and circumstances. This doesn't mean the anxiety disappears immediately. Freud knew that unconscious patterns change slowly, but it does mean you can start to respond to your anxiety as information rather than instruction. Instead of, I'm anxious, so I must be in danger. You can think, I'm anxious, so something in this situation is reminding my unconscious mind of danger from my past. This shift from being controlled by anxiety to being curious about anxiety is the beginning of what Freud called, where it was, their ego shall be. You're reclaiming conscious choice in areas where you've been operating from unconscious compulsion. But Freud also warned against trying to rush this process or force insights that aren't ready to emerge. He wrote, "Much will be gained if we succeed in transforming hysterical misery into common unhappiness." In other words, the goal isn't to eliminate all emotional pain, it's to distinguish between appropriate responses to current circumstances and inappropriate responses driven by past trauma. Some anxiety is useful. Some emotional pain is appropriate. The goal is to stop carrying emotional pain from the past into situations where it doesn't belong. Freud observed that people often resist recognizing anxiety as memory because it means acknowledging that painful things happened to them. It's easier to believe you're just naturally anxious than to face the reality that your anxiety developed for specific reasons. But he also knew that this acknowledgement is the first step toward freedom. When you understand that your anxiety is a response to remembered threats rather than present ones, you can start to develop new responses. You can practice reassuring the part of yourself that's remembering danger while staying present to the reality of your current safety. You can honor the child who learned these protective responses while updating the adult's understanding of current risks and resources. This is delicate work that often benefits from professional support, especially when dealing with severe trauma. But Freud believed that understanding the connection between anxiety and memory is itself healing. Your nervous system has been trying to tell you something important. Your anxiety has been carrying messages from parts of yourself that have been waiting to be heard and understood. When you stop fighting your anxiety and start listening to it, you often discover that it's not your enemy. It's a part of yourself that's been trying to protect you based on outdated information. Freud wrote, "The voice of the intellect is a soft one, but it does not rest until it has gained a hearing. Your unconscious mind has been speaking to you through anxiety, trying to gain a hearing for experiences that were too overwhelming to process when they happened. Now that you're older, stronger, and more resourceful, you can finally listen to what that part of yourself has been trying to tell you. You can thank your anxiety for trying to protect you, while also recognizing that the dangers it's warning you about may no longer be present. You can honor the reality of your past while choosing to live in the present." This is what Freud meant when he talked about making the unconscious conscious. It's not about dredging up every painful memory. It's about understanding how your past continues to influence your present so you can choose your responses rather than being chosen by them. Your anxiety isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that something happened to you, and part of you is still carrying the impact of that experience. When you understand anxiety as memory, you can finally start to heal not just the symptoms, but the source. You're not broken, you're not defective, you're not just anxious. You're remembering. And now that you know what you're remembering, you can finally start to heal. If this perspective on anxiety and memory resonates with you, subscribe for more insights into the unconscious patterns that shape our daily experiences. Share in the comments, Have you ever recognized a connection between your anxiety and a childhood memory? What did that recognition change for you? Remember, your anxiety isn't predicting the future. It's processing the past, and understanding the difference can transform how you relate to your own nervous system.